Jai Bhim Namo Buddhaya. We will begin with our class. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So far we have completed the 5 books of the Buddha and his Dhamma, and today we will be looking at begin to study the 6th book of the Buddha and his Dhamma. And as we have seen in the previous classes, the books up to from 1 to 5 were dedicated to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, and we have seen similarly that now Baba Sahib Ambedkar returns back to the Buddha in the last 3 books of the Buddha and his Dhamma, and we can see the significance of the historical Buddha in Baba Sahib's presentation of Buddhism. And we know that Baba Sahib Ambedkar had tremendous faith in the Buddha, so much of so that he was often moved to tears whenever he talked about the Buddha. And this part, the book 6, is titled as He and His Contemporaries. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar is talking about the Buddha and his contemporaries. And the book 6 is divided into 4 parts. And part 1 deals with his benefactors. Part 2 deals with his enemies, the enemies of the Buddha. Part 3 deals with critics of his doctrines, and part 4 deals with friends and admirers. So we can see from the scheme that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has tried to give the glimpse of his benefactors. And to begin with the part 1, which is titled as his benefactors, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has included 5 subparts in this scheme of part 1. And the subpart 1 is about gift from Bimbisara, and part 2 is about gift from Anathapindaka. Part 3 is gift from Jeevaka. Part 4 is gift from Amrapali, and part 5 is about munificence of Vishakha. So these names, if we study the Buddhist history or Buddhist culture or Buddhist arts, we can find this the person of Bimbisara, the person of Anathapindaka, Jeevaka, Amrapali, and Vishakha. They are often come into play. And that's why it is not just that there were just 5 benefactors of the Buddha. There were many benefactors of the Buddha, but here Baba Sahib Ambedkar has tried to pick up some of the prominent examples of the benefactors. So let's begin with King Bimbisara. And those who are familiar with the Buddhist text, we know that King Bimbisara comes often in the Buddhist texts. And Bimbisara was a very prominent king of Magadha. And we know that time, as we have seen in the previous classes of the Buddha and his Dhamma, Magadha and Kosals were 2 big empires of the time. And Bimbisara was the emperor of one of the biggest of the empires of the time in India, that's Magadha. And King Bimbisara was not just a follower of the Buddha, he was also the great devotee, the Upasaka, and the great supporter of Buddha's Dhamma. So one day, after becoming a lay disciple, Bimbisara asked, "Might the Blessed Lord consent to take his meal with me tomorrow, together with the fraternity of the monks?" Now you see, this sort of invitation to the Bhikshu Sangha, along with the Buddha, to come and have food, is so prominent in the Buddhist text. And we have seen in the subsequent developments in the Indian history, particularly the religious traditions and different sampradaya, this communal feast of the renunciates have become a very important part of the teachings of this great people. And we know that the Buddha used to often go from door to door to beg for his food, and he encouraged his disciple to go from door to door for their food without discrimination, without going to the single house again and again. And after the cycle of 14 days, they could go back to a single the same house again. And the Buddha created a mechanism by which he wanted to bring his disciple in contact with the day-to-day realities of the societies existing at the time. But sometimes the Buddha also partook the feast of the kings and the rich people, because the Buddha never discriminate between the rich or poor. So here there was an invitation from Bimbisara, and Buddha agreed. He consented with silent. So Buddha never said, whenever he was invited to meals, he didn't give the verbal consent, but he remained silent, which implied that the Buddha has accepted to go to the Bimbisar for his meals. So now the paragraph 4 of this part. Then King Bimbisar, when he understood that the Blessed One had accepted his invitation, rose from his seat, respectfully saluted the Buddha. Now the King Bimbisara is saluting the Buddha, passing around him with his right side towards him, went away. So, that was a way of saluting the Buddha, with your right hand towards the Buddha, because the right hand was supposed to be the hand which was meant for fight, and it was supposed to be, as if you have laid down your arms for, before the Buddha. And it was also the hand which was considered to be the auspicious hand. So whenever, we see the circumambulation around the stupas or any sacred place in Buddhism, it is done, in a manner where your right hand is towards the Buddha all the time. So, this is how the King Bimbisara saluted the Buddha. And when the night had elapsed, Bimbisara ordered excellent food to be prepared, and at time announced to the Blessed One in the words, "It is time, Lord, the meal is ready." Now, the verse number 6 is also very significant. It looks like very mundane sort of a verse, but if you look into it deeply, we can find so many of the Buddha's qualities there. And in the forenoon, the Blessed One, having put on his underrobe, Sanghati, the Buddha put his underrobe, took his alms bowl, and with his robe on, entered the city of Rajagraha, accompanied by monks who had all been Jatilas before. So we have seen the conversion of Jatilas in the previous parts of the Buddha's Dhamma. These three brothers converted to Buddhism, and they became the followers of the Buddha. And along with them, the Buddha entered the city of Rajagraha. Now, if any of you have gone to visited the city of Rajagraha, you can see the beauty of Rajagraha. There are 5 hills surrounding Rajagraha. There is very famous mountain in Rajagraha called the Vulture's Peak, Gridhakuta, where the Buddha has given innumerable sermons. And from that height of the Gridhakut, Buddha used to look at the city of Rajagraha, which was the capital of Bimbisara. Bimbisara used to live in Rajagraha. And even today, if you go to city of Rajagraha, you can see the jail in which, the remains of the jail in which Ajatashatru confined Bimbisara. From there, there Bimbisara was looking at the Buddha, and he was expressing his devotion and faith to the Buddha when he was imprisoned by his own son Ajatashatru. And just near to that, there is now the archaeological evidences of the presence of the monastery that was gifted by Jeevaka to the Buddha, and we are going to look into that in the class. So Buddha went there, and the Blessed One went to the palace of the King Bimbisara. Having gone there, he sat down with the monks who followed him on seats laid out for them. Then King Bimbisara, with his own hands, served the fraternity of monks with the Buddha at its head. When the Blessed One had finished his meal, cleaned his bowl and his hands, he sat down near him. You see, this is very significant. This looks like very mundane, but it's the enlightened person of the Buddha. He didn't expect others to do work for him. He did his work himself. Like, he cleaned his own bowl. In the king's palace, there could be people who could wash his bowl, who could wash his hands. But the Buddha always chose to do his own work. And that is what is the significant thing about the Buddha, the personality of the Buddha, the magnificent human being the Buddha was, that he did his own work. He wore his own clothes, he cleaned his own bowl of, the bowl where he received the food, and he cleaned his own hands, he cleaned his own body. He didn't rely on anybody. So this is, I think, is very significant to mention here. Sitting near him, King Bimbisara thought, Where may I find a place for the Blessed One to live in, not too far from the village? So the ideal place he wanted to find out for the Buddha, where the Buddha can stay. And we have seen the dialogue between the Bimbisara and Buddha in the beginning of the Buddhism as to how Bimbisara befriended the young Siddhartha Gautama. And it's a beautiful dialogue that you can go back and refer to our previous classes between King Bimbisara and Siddhartha Gautama. Before Buddha became the Buddha, there was an interaction between Bimbisara and Siddhartha Gautama, very beautifully narrated by Babasaheb Ambedkar in the previous sections of the Buddha and Dhamma. But here, he is now trying to find out the way to help the Buddha with a place to dwell, which is like not far from the village, not too near, suitable for going and coming, because the Buddha and his monks used to beg. So suitable for going and coming, easily accessible by people who keep on seeking him. By day, not too crowded, where there is little sound, little noise. By night, sequesters, hidden from men, well fitted for a retired life. You see, these are the qualities of the Buddhist place. So if anytime, if you want to develop a Buddhist place, these are the qualities that we have to look about, in order to set up some place for the Buddhist activities or for the Buddhist purposes. The King Bimbisara thought, there is Veluvana, my pleasure garden, which is not too far from the town and not too near, suitable for going and coming. What if I were to make an offering of the Veluvana pleasure garden to the fraternity of monks with the Buddha as at its head? So you see, in the Buddhist scriptures, you will see the mention of Veluvana all the time. Veluvana is, of course, the bamboo grove, and it was a pleasure garden of King Bimbisara. And even today, you can visit Veluvana. It's there in Rajagraha. It's a very beautiful place. And you see, there is something very, very interesting in the Buddhist history that, whatever we read in the Buddhist texts, it is not mythology, it's a history. And we can find all these places which are mentioned in the Buddhist text. Even today, we can go to the Girdakut mountain, we can go to the Veluvan, we can even visit, the vihar that was donated by Jeevaka, which we are going to see. So he made an offering of the Veluvana, his own pleasure garden, to the Buddha. And King Bimbisara took a golden vessel with water in it to be poured over the hands of the Buddha. So Buddha had his hands like this, and the water was poured by Bimbisara. And he said, I give this Veluvana pleasure garden, Lord, to the fraternity of monks with the Buddha as its head. The Blessed One accepted the path. Now see, the Buddha didn't accept any gift personally. The Buddha never accepted anything personally for his own personal benefit. He accepted the gifts on the behalf of the Sangha, of the fraternity of the monks and nuns. He didn't accept it for himself. Then the Blessed One, after having taught, incited, animated, and gladdened King Bimbisara by religious discourse, rose from his seat and went away. So this was a tradition of the Buddha. Whenever he accepted anything, whenever he was invited for his meals, in order to return back, to pay back to those who have offered him food, the Buddha used to give them the sermon. And this is what exactly happened here. That the Buddha was not dependent on the ladies for the food. It was like an exchange. The Buddha was offering the material food, whatever that was, and he used to bless them with his teachings. And this is very beautiful. Taught, incited, animated, and gladdened. These are the qualities of the Buddha's teaching. If we learn the Buddha's Dhamma, it has the quality to incite us. It has the quality to animate us. It has the quality to gladden our minds. And that's what exactly happened to King Bimbisara. And after having finished his discourse, the Buddha left. And when he left, he went to the Bhikshu Sangha and he addressed them. I allow you monks to receive this donation of a path. So that's how the Veluvana came into possession of the Buddhist Sangha. And there were many of the gifts that was given to the Buddhist Sangha. And the Buddha encouraged people to have it so that they can practice Dhamma. And he encouraged his disciple to find out the caves. And that's how the bhikshu started living in the caves. We have early evidences of Sariputra and Moglayan living in the caves and practicing the Buddha's Dhamma there. So that was about Bimbisara, and he was a great benefactor of Buddha. And there are sutras now associated with Bimbisara, and how he felt devotion towards the Buddha and how he expressed his faith in the Buddha. And he has become a kind of a paragon of a faith in the Buddha, depicted in so many of the caves. depicted in so much of the Buddhist arts, and Bimbisara has its own persona along with many disciples of the Buddha. So gift from Anathapindaka. This is the second thing. We are now going back to the subpart 2, gift from Anathapindaka. After his conversion, Anathapindaka once went to the Blessed Lord, taking his seat on his right side. He said, "The Lord knows that I dwell in Shravasti, a land rich in produce and enjoying peace. Pasin Nadi is the great king thereof." Now, let me talk to you something about Shravasti. So as I was telling you about Rajagriha is a beautiful place even today. If you happen to visit Shravasti, which was a place where the Buddha gave many sermons, according to the Mahayana tradition, the Buddha taught Diamond Sutra in Shravasti. And even today, if you go to Shravasti, you can visit the place where this offering was made by Anathapindaka. You can see in all its past glory, the construction of the monastery there in Shravasti. And that's all for you to visit someday. Shravasti is a place worth visiting because of its great significance with the Buddha. So let's hear about the story of how the Anathapindaka's arama came into being. Very beautiful story, very moving story, very touching story that we are going to look at. So the Lord knows that I dwell in Shravasti, a land rich in produce and enjoying peace. Prasannajit is the king, great king thereof. Now am I wishful to found a vihar there. I pray you of your tenderness, come to Shravasti and accept it from me. Shravasti is also a place where the Buddha spent a lot of rainy retreats because the Buddha was very fond of Shravasti. It's a very beautiful, it was a very rich town of that time, of that period in the ancient India, and Buddha preferred to live in Shravasti for a long time, and Buddha indeed stayed in Shravasti for many years. So the Blessed Lord kept silent and thereby accepted willingness to accept the gift from what is called Anathapindaka. Now, what is the name Anathapindaka indicates? You see, Anathapindaka, the friend of the destitute and the supporter of orphans, having returned home, saw the garden of heir apparent Jeta, with its green groves and limpid rivulets, and thought, this is the place where will be most suitable as a vihar for the fraternity of the Blessed One. And he went to the prince and asked leave to buy the ground. So he happened to find this beautiful garden which has many small rivers and was lush green. And Anathapindaka, who is called the friend of destitute and supporter of orphans, he's also one of the very important figures in the Buddhist history, often depicted in the caves and in the Buddhist arts. Prince Jeta was not inclined towards selling the land to Anathapindaka because he valued that garden so much. He at first refused, but said at last, if you can cover it with gold, then and for no other price shall you have it. So he said, okay, if you are insisting, you cover it with gold, and I will give it to you. Anathapindaka rejoiced and began to spread his gold. But Jeta said, spare yourself trouble, for I will not sell. So according to the story, Anathapindaka brought cart full of gold, and he started spreading the gold coins on the ground of the garden so that he will acquire it for the Buddha. But even after doing this, the Buddha, he said that, I won't buy this garden, sell this garden to you, even if you do that. And then there was a dispute between both Anathapindaka and Jeta. Very beautiful story. Meanwhile, the people began to talk of unwanted proceeding, and the prince, hearing more of the details, knowing that Anathapindaka was not only very wealthy, but also straightforward and sincere, inquired into his plans. On hearing the name of Blessed One, the prince became anxious to share in the foundation, and he accepted only half of the gold, one half of the gold, saying, yours is the land, but mine are the trees. I will give the trees as my share of the offering to the Lord. So when Jeta heard about this faith of Anathapindaka in the Buddha, and why Anathapindaka wanted to do this, to buy this land, to buy this garden, he was moved. Jeta was moved, and Jeta accepted that he will give the garden at half a price, half of the gold. And he said, the trees belong to me, the ground belongs to you. I am going to offer the trees to the Buddha. You see, very beautiful moving story. Having made the foundation, they began to build the hall, which rose loftily in due proportions according to the directions which the Blessed One had given. And it was beautifully decorated with appropriate carving. This is very beautiful, very moving passage. This is the Buddha, when the land was given and when the building was to be constructed, the Buddha gave the instructions. Imagine an enlightened man like the Buddha giving the instruction to how that vihar can be built, how the aram can be built. And in some of the Buddhist scriptures, we can find the what is called the mention or the description of the beautiful Anathapindaka's arama that we can find out in the Buddhist text, the description of it. And it was beautifully decorated with appropriate carvings. There were carvings done on wood and on maybe on the stones. That was the Buddhist tradition. While the Blessed One entered Jetavana, Anathapindaka scattered flowers and burned incense. So when the Buddha came to Jetavana, you see, this is very beautiful. Scattered flowers and burned incense. And as a sign of the gift, he poured water from a golden dragon pitcher, the Naga vessel as it were. And he said, this Jetavana Vihar I give for the use of the brotherhood throughout the world. You see, this is, we can gloss over these words here. Brotherhood throughout the world. So he was not gifting the Jetavana or his aram to the present order or the present brotherhood or the present sangha. He was giving it to the monks and nuns throughout the world. And this is so significant that in the Buddhist tradition, we will see that there was never a conflict between various Buddhist sangha. And we now know that they were dwelling in the same vihar sometimes, even when they had the different approaches to learning or understanding the Buddha's teaching. That is the beauty of Buddhism. There is nothing that can separate the sangha. People, we have now evidences that the Sinhala Sangha was living with Mahayana Sangha, and Mahayana Sangha, within that there were many traditions. So in Buddhism, there was a kind of a fundamental unity between the various Sangha. And this is very significant. This Jetavan Vihar I give for the use of the brotherhood throughout the world. The Blessed One received the gift and replied. See, this reply of the Buddha is also very important. May all evil influences be overcome. May the offering promote the kingdom of righteousness, Dhammarajya, and be a permanent blessing to mankind in general and especially also to the giver. So you see, the purpose of giving or donation is not narrow. It's very vast. It's very vast in the sense of the reply of the Buddha as to what happens when we give the gift to the Buddha Sangha. What happens? This offering promote the kingdom of righteousness, Dhammarajya, and be a permanent blessing to mankind in general and especially also to the giver. And now, very significant verse. Anathapindaka was one of the 80 chief disciples who bore the title of chief alms giver. You see, the Buddha had 80 top disciples, including monks and nuns. And Anathapindaka was one of the top disciples of the Buddha, who was given the title chief alms giver. He was very famous for his charity. He was very famous for his generosity. Anathapindaka in the Buddhist history, as I told you, is depicted in several of the Buddhist arts and paintings, and in the Buddhist scriptures. He is a very prominent presence, one of the prominent presence among the Buddha's disciples. So this was the benevolence of Bimbisara towards the Buddha and the Sangha, and of course he was deeply into practicing the Dhamma. Now, gift from Jeevaka. Jeevaka was a great doctor, and he was so busy, as we hear from the Buddhist text, that he had so many patients to administer every day, and so many people were ready to pay him a huge amount of money to cure their diseases. They used to pay him a huge amount of money because he was a very trained doctor, and he was somebody who instituted the practices, the hygienical practices in the Buddha Sangha. And the Buddha Sangha was famous for its hygiene, its cleanliness, And a lot of people were attracted towards the Buddha Sangha because of this hygiene and the cleanliness that was assured to the bhikshus. Now, Jeevaka, the physician, visited the Blessed One twice a day whenever the Blessed One happened to be in Rajagraha. Very important. Even when he was so busy in his work, he used to see the Buddha twice in a day. He was so much fond of the Buddha. He never became the Buddhist monk, and Buddha asked him not to become a Buddhist monk. Buddha asked Jeevaka to serve the humanity, to serve the people who are having diseases. Very, very interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we make some ideal of renunciate, which is an ideal in reality. There is no question about that. But to service the humanity is also very important, and it is as good as doing other things. And here Jeevaka was so much busy, so much earning a lot of wealth, but he chose to visit the Buddha twice whenever the Buddha used to be in Rajagraha. And Jeevaka found that Veluvana, gifted away by Bimbisara, was too far, and it is too far from Griakut, from Vulture Peak, where the Buddha used to live. And Vulture Peak was one of the favorite places of the Buddha. If you visit even today, you can see that mountain, beautiful mountain. The Vulture Peak is such a beautiful mountain. If you go there, if you go to the top, and if you have a look around, you will be amazed by the hills around, the wind and the forest around. It's very beautiful. So Buddha, of course, chose to live in the caves, and there is a cave even today you can visit where the Buddha used to live in Giddakut. And Jeevaka found the Veluvana gifted away to the Blessed One by King Bimbisara too far away. Jeevaka had his own park in Rajagraha known as Ambavana, which was much nearer from his place. He thought of building a vihar with all its adjuncts and present the Ambavana and vihara to the Blessed One. With this idea in his mind, he approached the Blessed One and requested him to let him fulfill his wishes. The Blessed Lord showed his acceptance by remaining silent. Now, a few years back, there was an inscription which said that this is the Jeevaka's monastery was found. The Jeevaka's hospital was found. And this is very significant. As you know, whatever we read in the Buddhist text, we begin to find out the material evidences of it. So the finding of the inscription of the presence of Ashoka, Jeevaka's hospital is very significant. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stretch a class a little bit so that I can finish with Amrapali and Vishakha, because I think this is the part which can study in the single class, and we can stretch a little bit today. So gift from Amrapali. Now Amrapali was a very top level citizen of the city of Vaishali. And we know that Vaishali was one of the places that the Buddha was very fond of, because Vaishali was a democratic republic of that time, and the Lichavis had a democracy. And the Buddha was very much fond of Vaishali, and he used to, we know the story that when the Buddha was leaving to Kushinagar, he looked back at Vaishali thrice. He was in so much awe of Vaishali. And from the place where the Buddha looked back at Vaishali, Emperor Ashoka built the royal pillar there to commemorate where the Buddha looked back at Vaishali. And the Vaishali had a very special place in the heart of the Buddha, and he was staying there. He said he was staying in Nadika, and he wanted to go for a wandering. And Buddha was a wanderer. He never, even he had so many places, Buddha didn't choose to stay in one place. He was wandering all the time. So he asked Ananda, come Ananda, let's go to Vaishali. And they left for Vaishali. Then the Exalted One proceeded with a great company of the brethren to Vaishali. And there at Vaishali, the Exalted One stayed at Amrapali's gruha. That was a mango gruha. So there were a lot of mango trees. You can imagine, the ancient time. Even today, you can see beautiful mango groves around, and you can imagine the Buddha there, in the mango grove. And this is a very significant story about Buddha, the story of equality, the story of commitment. This is a very beautiful story. So now the courtesan Amrapali heard that the Exalted One had arrived at Vaishali. So she went to the Buddha with carriage, lot of carriage, with a lot of, in today's parlance, with a lot of cars. So with a lot of carriages, she went to the Buddha, and she went up to where the carriages could go. And from there, she walked on to where the Buddha was. And she also paid her homage to the Buddha, sat respectfully on one side, and when she was thus seated, exalted one instructed her with religious discourse. So Buddha, used to teach, whenever people visit him. Then she addressed the exalted one and said, "May the exalted one do me the honor of taking his meal together with the brethren at my house tomorrow." So she invited the Buddha with the Bhikshu Sangha to come to her house, and the Buddha accepted. So she saluted the Buddha, left the place, and when she was leaving the place, the Lichavis, with all their beautiful decorated carriage, were approaching the Buddha, and they met the Lichavis. And the description of the Lichavis that we are going to see is very beautifully explained here in the Buddha and Dhamma. But here, the Amrapali and the Lichavis, the princess of the Lichavis, encounter on the carriage, their carriages came nearer, and they crossed on the way. They crossed on the way. So Amrapali drove up against the young Lichavis, axle to axle, wheel to wheel, and yoke to yoke. And the Lichavis said to Amrapali, the courtesan, "How is it, Amrapali, that thou drivest up against us thus?" You see, it was against their pride that this courtesan is driving her carriages, wheel to wheel, yoke to yoke, axle to axle. So, Amrapali, he said, "My lord, I have just invited exalted one and his brethren for their morrow's meal," said Amrapali. So Amrapali said that I came here to visit the Buddha, my lord, and he has consented to come to visit my place for his meals. So Amrapali said, to Amrapali, the Lichavis said, "Amrapali, sell this honor to us for 100,000. It's because they wanted themselves to invite the Buddha. He said, "Amrapali, please allow us this honor of inviting the Buddha for meals." And even they offered the price for it. They said, just let Buddha come to us tomorrow, and we will sort of offer you 100,000. That was a huge money of the time. He said, the Lichavis said to Amrapali when they were crossing axle to axle, yoke to yoke, wheel to wheel, they said to the Amrapali that please let us have this honor of inviting the Buddha. And Amrapali said, "My lord, were you to offer all Vesali with its subject territory, I would not give it up." You see, this Amrapali's faith and the love for the Buddha, isn't it? We all have to learn about this faith in the Buddha, isn't it? Because without the faith in the Buddha, we cannot learn his teachings, isn't it? We have to place our heart into something higher, like the enlightened person, like the Buddha, so that we can receive his teachings. And here is a perfect example of Amrapali. She is not ready to sell the honor of inviting the Buddha at any price. She says that even if you offer the entire Vesali to me with its territory, I am not going to give up this honor of inviting the Buddha at my place tomorrow. The Lichavis cast up their hands, exclaimed, "We are outdone by this mango girl, Amrapali," because she was the owner of a mango group. "We are outreached by this mango girl," and they went to Amrapali's group. Knowing that they were outdone, they still thought of approaching the Blessed One in the hope that he might reconsider and give their invitation first preference. So they went on to Amrapali's group. So they thought that the Buddha might reconsider the invitation. So they went because they were like the princess, and Amrapali was just a courtesan. So they thought that the Buddha might change his, view. When the exalted one saw the Lichavis approaching in the distance, he addressed the brethren and said, very interesting passage in the Buddha and his Dhamma. Okay. "Brethren, let those of the brethren who have never seen the Devas gaze upon this company of the Lichavis. Behold this company of the Lichavis. Compare this company of the Lichavis, for they are even company of the next world Devas." You see, the Lichavis were so bright. The Lichavis were so powerful. The Lichavis, as if imitate some kind of aura, godlike aura, isn't it? It has to do with the political system that they have. They had a best political system of the time, the democracy, and the Buddha was in awe of the Lichavis democracy. And Buddha has given them a lot of beautiful talks about how they can preserve the democracy. And here the Buddha is likening them with the Devas. He says that those who have not seen the Devas, here is a chance for you to see the Devas on the earth that were the Lichavis. And when they had ridden as far as they could go, then they got down from their carriages and approached the Buddha on the feet. They paid their salutation to the Buddha. and they said that may the exalted one do us the honor of taking his meal together with the brethren at our house tomorrow. And the Buddha says, no, no, I cannot do that because I have promised Lichavis to dine tomorrow with Amrapali. So this is what the Buddha did. And then the Buddha went to Amrapali's house. They, along with the Bhikshu Sangha, they had their meals there. And then the Buddha gave his sermon, and she gifted the Buddha with a lot of legends. So you see, in this story, we can, in this episode, in the life of the Buddha, we can see that the commitment of the Buddha, he never discriminate between the people he liked and the people who were socially, outcasted. For example, Amrapali was treated as a courtesan, though she was the most beautiful woman in the Lichavi. She was supposed to be like Miss Vaishali of that time. She was such a beautiful woman, and she commanded a lot of respect and she commanded a lot of wealth. But she was not as powerful as the Lichavis themselves. But the Buddha didn't succumb to that power. The Buddha accepted and kept on his word of going to visit to Amrapali, and I think that is very significant. So I'm going to come to the last subpart of this part 1 of the book 6 of the Buddha and his Dhamma, and I'm going to talk about the munificence of Vishakha. Vishakha is an equivalent of Anathapindaka, and Anathapindaka and Vishakha, they were famous for their generosity, and they are depicted, as I said, in the Buddhist art history everywhere, and you can see that the women were at par with the men in benefiting the Buddha's Sangha, isn't it? And Anathapindaka and Vishakha, they parallel together. Whatever the gifts Anathapindaka made, the same gifts Vishakha made, and she was such a benefactor of the Buddha that we are going to see, and this is a very interesting part. So munificence of Vishakha that we are going to study. Vishakha was a wealthy woman of Shravasti, and she had many children and grandchildren. He said that when she was a child of 7, she saw the Buddha, and that time, she was completely taken over by the Buddha and, Buddha's Dhamma, and she was a great benefactor of the Buddha's Sangha. So she invited the Buddha to her house for the meals, as that was a tradition. And the night before the Buddha was to go to her house, there was a torrential rainfall, and because of the heavy rainfall, the bhikshus had not much of the cloth. So what the bhikshus did, they hang over their cloth somewhere, and they were naked, and they were taking the rains on their bodies, because if the rain falls on their chiva, they will be wet and they will not be able to visit Amrapali the next day, Vishakha the next day for their meals. So they were preserving their clothes, and they were taking the rain on their body naked. So when the next day the Blessed One had finished his meal, she took her seat at his side and spoke. So the next day, Vishakha sat next to the Buddha after the meals, and she said to the Buddha, 8 are the boons, Lord, which I beg of the Blessed One. She said to the Buddha that, please give me the 8 boons. I want 8 boons from you. And the Buddha said, okay, the Tathagatas, O Vishakha, grant no boons unless they know what they are. Isn't it? You see, in the Indian tradition, people ask the boons without knowing what they are. The Buddha said, no, I'm not going to give you boons unless I know why I'm doing that. Isn't it very rational? Buddhism is nothing but not rationality. So the Buddha is very rational being. He said, okay, I will give you, but let me know what is it. Unless I know what you want, how I am going to give you the boons? So she said, okay, proper Lord, and unobjectionable are the boons I ask. So having received the permission to ask the boons, Vishakha said, I desire, Lord, through all my life. The Buddhism is a commitment throughout the life, all our life, till the end of our last breath. We have to commit ourselves to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So she says, through all my life, to bestow robes for rainy season on the Sangha. So she said that you give me a promise that I will give the robes to the Bhikshu Sangha every rainy season. So she asked this promise from the Buddha that let me have this responsibility of giving the robes to the Bhikshu Sangha in the rainy season, to the Sangha rainy season. Second boon, she asked that she will give the food for the incoming bhikshus. So those incoming bhikshus which are coming from other towns, she asked the Buddha that she will offer the food for the incoming bhikshus. The third boon that she asked was for food for outgoing bhikshus. She said that I would like to also give the food for the outgoing bhikshus. The fourth thing she asked was food for the sick. She said that those bhikshus who are sick, I would like to offer them the food, because the Buddhist tradition was to beg for the food. But she said that those bhikshus who are sick, I will give them the food. Fifth, food for those who wait upon the sick. So I will also give the food to those who are waiting on the sick bhikshus. And the sixth thing she asked was medicine for the sick. She said that I will give the medicine for the sick people, sick bhikshus. And the seventh thing that she asked the promise from the Buddha, very, very interesting. She said that I will constantly supply what is called the rice milk for the Sangha. Rice milk was considered to be very healing. And even today in the Buddhist Sanghas in Japan and in other parts of the world, the rice milk is considered to be a delicacy in the Buddhist tradition, which we call in today's parlance the kheer. Mixing the milk and rice together and cooking it together. It is considered to be very, very nutritious. So that time it was considered to be very nutritious. So the seventh promise that she asked from the Buddha was that she will constantly supply rice milk for the Sangha. And she said that I will give the bathing robes for the bhikshunis, the sisters. She said that whenever the bhikshunis will take bath, I will offer them the bathing robe so that they can take the bath in the bathing robe. So these are the 8 boons that she asked from the Buddha. But said the Lord, oh Vishakha, have you in view asking these 8 boons of the Tathagata? She said, why you are asking these 8 things from the Tathagata? What is it that made you ask these 8 gifts from the Tathagata? And Vishakha said, yesterday when I was inviting the Bhikshu Sangha to my home, and my servant came to the Bhikshu Sangha and she saw the bhikshus are naked. And she was so much, disgusted by the naked ascetics. She thought that they are naked ascetics, they have no shame. They are just naked. And, they are letting the rain fall on their bodies. So she said that she returned to me and reported accordingly. And I had to send her the second time. She went the second time and she found, that this naked ascetics is not a good sight to hold. So she said that I had this view to ask for you this, are these 8 boons. What is this view? That I will offer the special garments for use in the rainy season. Then why the second wish? An incoming bhikshu. So whenever the bhikshu visits from another town, they must be tired. They might have traveled a lot. They might be hungry. So I would like to offer them the food throughout my life. Those monks who are going out from the monasteries or arama, she would like to offer them the food because they don't know where they are going to, whether they are going to get their next meals, how will their next journey. So she said that I would like to offer them the food for the outgoing bhikshus. And for the sick bhikshus, because they will not be able to go out and beg for their food because they are sick, she would like to offer them the food. And for those who are attending to the sick bhikshus, they would like to offer them the food because even they will not be able to go out to beg for the food. Medicine is self-explanatory because, if you are sick, we need medicines. And the rice milk, which was considered to be nutritious that time, Vishakha said that I will offer the rice milk in the constant supply to the vihar because it gives readiness to mind, dispel hunger and thirst. It is wholesome nourishment for the healthy and for the sick as a medicine. So you see, the rice milk is cooked in a very special way. And in the Buddhist tradition, on the special occasion, it is cooked. All over Maharashtra, if there are any Buddhist occasions, the people cook rice milk and, offer it to the people. So, it comes from Vishakha. Of course, Sujata was the first person to offer the rice milk to the Buddha when he was very, very down and very weak. Finally, Lord, the Bhikshunis are in the habit of bathing in the river Chiravati. So Bhikshunis used to go to bath. And whenever they went to bath, there were also other women, particularly the courtesans, used to take bath. And they used to ridicule the naked Bhikshunis, saying that, what use? You are so beautiful. Why don't you, enter into the life of, enjoyment? What good is for you to maintain your chastity? And so on and so forth. So she said, impure Lord is nakedness for a woman, disgusting and revolting. That's why she declared that she would offer the bathing robes to the bhikshunis. So, and the Buddha accepted, when Buddha was convinced of logical arguments, the Buddha accepted, The Vishakha, he was a powerful figure. The Buddha even listened to her all the time. And this is how Vishakha convinced the Buddha that, he should accept the 8 boons. So, he said, Vishakha, what advantage you have if you offer this? And this is very significant. What advantage one gets if we offer something to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha? So, Vishakha said that if any monks come to come to Vaishali, and if they have died, people will inquire into what kind of the end they had, whether they had a good destiny. So if she hears from the Buddha that they have attained nirvana or arhantship, she will be so happy that she played a role in contributing towards the enlightenment of those monks and the nuns, isn't it? So it's understand. So the Buddhist way of giving is for the enlightenment of the humanity, isn't it? Why do we cherish dana? We don't cherish the dana just for the sake of the dana. The purpose of giving in Buddhism is to create a just society, is to create a kingdom of righteousness, is to create the enlightened human beings. That is what is the purpose of the Buddhist dana. And that's what Vishakha tells to the Buddha, that if I hear that some of the bhikshus have attained to the nirvana, arhantship, I will be very happy. Isn't it? She said that because of that, I will have a tremendous joy. Okay. So because I help the bhikshus to nourish themselves physically, bodily, and if they attain to nirvana, I will have this tremendous joy. And the verse number 22, I am going to read it slowly. I am going to explain you the deep meaning of this verse number 22. Then will gladness spring up within me. You see, the glad or joy is very important in Buddhism. Without joy, the Buddhism is a religion of joy. Buddhism is not a pessimistic religion as it is projected by some quarters. Buddhism is a religion of joy. So, by giving, by dana, what happens? It gladdens our heart. You try attempting to do it. Try to give dana without having anything in your heart. Just give for the sake of giving. So when you do it, when you give for the sake of giving, when you give for the sake of people attaining enlightenment, benefiting their lives and others, when you make that kind of a donation, when you make that kind of a dana, what happens? Gladness springs up within me. Glad and joy will come to me. And so rejoicing, all my frame will be at peace. You see, the glad, the joy, the spiritual joy of giving leads to what is called peace. Isn't it? The joy is followed by the peace. Rejoicing, all my frame will be at peace. All my existence will be at peace. Giving to the enlightenment of the world, giving to making the world enlightened. If I do it, it will gladden my heart. It will gladden my entire being, my all frame. And my all frame will be at peace. Now listen carefully. Being thus at peace, I shall experience a blissful feeling of content. This is described in terms of the meditative practices. But here, Vishakha is explaining the very process by which, one becomes enlightened. You see, she says that, when my entire frame is at peace, being thus at peace, I shall experience a blissful feeling of content. And in that bliss, my heart will be at rest. So if you want to do anything in the world, our heart should be peaceful. Our heart should be at rest. That will be to me an exercise of my moral powers. So once your heart is peaceful, once your heart is at rest, that gives rise to the morality. The morality comes from the peaceful mind. Very deep, isn't it? The morality doesn't come from the distracted mind. When our minds are at rest, when we are at peace, we can exercise our moral powers. An exercise of 7 kinds of wisdom. So because of the moral power, there will be an exercise of the 7 kinds of wisdom. This, Lord, was the advantage I had in my view in asking those 8 boons of blessed Lord. You see, such a powerful, practice is, the dana. It is said that the Buddhism begins with the dana, by giving, by sharing, by caring. So once we have this habit of sharing and caring, it gladdens our heart. It brings joy to our being. It brings peace to our entire frame. It brings to us contentment. And our heart, our mind is at rest. And when our mind is at rest, we can exercise our moral power, we can exercise 7 kinds of wisdom, and this is the advantage that we get by doing the charity. And the Buddha says that if we do the charity in the right way, in the right field, it will bring the abundance of fruits. Had it not been for the charity of Vishakha and Anathapindaka and so many of the people in the Buddhist history, we wouldn't have had this beautiful Dhamma that we are listening today. It is because of the charity of the people that we have received this great gift of the Dhamma. Vishakha is so significant. Anathapindaka is so significant because they created the material condition for Dhamma to thrive. So, the Buddha says, whatever donation of women upright in life, a disciple of Blessed One may bestow in gladness of heart and without stint, her gift is heavenly, destructive of sorrow and productive of bliss. A blissful life does not attain entering upon the path. Blissful life, does she attain entering upon the path that is free from corruption and impurity, aiming at good, happy does she become, and she rejoices in her charitable action. Very important, to make the dana in Buddhism. Very, very important. So the Vishakha not only gave this, she was a very rich woman. And, like Anathapindaka, who gave this great garden to the Buddha, she also gave to the Sangha, the Purva Aram, which was considered a very beautiful monastery. And it is said that even today we can find the stupa of Vishakha in Vaishali. If we happen to visit, you see all the stories that are told here, they are not stories, they are the historical facts. Because whatever is mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures, we can go back in the geography and we can find the exact places where these incidences have taken place. So she gifted to the Buddha Sangha, Purva Aram or Eastern Garden, was the first to become a matron of lay sisters. And she was the matron of not only the upasikas, but also the bhikshunis. So I will stop here with the part 1, and we have seen how beautifully laid out is this part of the benefactors of the Buddha, and that is what is the beauty of Buddha and his Dhamma. We begin to squeeze so many nectar out of this Buddha and his Dhamma. If we read it carefully, if we imbibe the way the Buddha, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has presented as the Buddha's Dhamma, and this part 1 of the book 6 of the Buddha and his Dhamma is no exception. So I will stop here and I will open up the class for another 5 minutes of discussion. So thank you so much for listening, and we will end up the class here. So anybody has anything to say?
Sir, only have one reflection.
Yeah.
These gifts, what I have taken from this is, these gifts are the assets in making.
Yeah.
For the sharing, caring, and enhancing the fraternity.
Yes.
And it completely reflects this book completely reflects our preamble, where we talk about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. These in these all the book that I have taken in this research. Thank you so much.
Very, very good. Anybody has anything to comment or share?
Gautam Buddha was always in favor of gender equality.
Yes.
He always entertainment talk with Vaishali, Amrapali, and never had denied their entry into this vihara or like that. So unnecessarily still Gautam Buddha was blamed that he did not allow the women to enter the Sangha initially.
No, I think that question is answered very well by Baba Sahib Ambedkar in The Rise and Fall of Hindu Women. There is a small booklet which Baba Ambedkar has written. Yes. Go on, Alka Madam.
Yes.
Please share, Alka Madam.
Favor of gender equality, he never differentiated between these two. And he was blamed for the denying entry, but it was not like that. He was of the admission of the women in Sangha was denied only on the practical grounds.
Yeah.
Because many instances are there where Buddha always welcome women like Vishakha,
Yes.
then
Yes.
um, he suddenly became sad hearing that his wife, Queen Malika, delivered a female baby. Then
Wow. Good. Very good.
become a king.
Mhm.
Yeah, so he was always in favor of women.
Right. Good. Very good point.
Yeah.
Any other comment? Any other comments? If not, then we will end the class here for today and see you in the next class.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining in today. Thank you.
Thank you.